someone might end up on the throne unless George R.R. Martin does indeed just kill everyone and let the White Walkers have everything. I first got introduced to the TV series by one of my friends and binged the first 3 seasons, then watched the 4th one as it was released before just utterly consuming the books because I was impatient and wanted to know what was happening. I think as an adaptation it brings a lot more accessibility for people who maybe aren't going to read quite a hefty set of novels, but the TV series, lots of people can just check in, they can watch it, and then beyond that, for people who do read the books, obsessive people like me who consume and see the differences between the two, you start to see patterns and notice what's being taken out of the TV series and what's being sort of boosted up, and it lets you sort of theorise what might be happening in the end. I think there's a lot of things that had to be streamlined in the translation from book to TV, and it's resulted in a lot of characters sort of being combined, which means for some of them their paths have changed a little bit, like Sansa particularly. Her storyline, her story arc moves quite a bit faster, and you can see her being combined with characters like, there's a minor character, Jane Poole, in the books, and Sansa's kind of moved into being that character as part of her arc, and just seeing all these combinations happening. I think at its centre it's probably still reaching for the end point, because I've read in interviews that they talk to George R.R. Martin about what the end goal is, so they're aiming for that end point, but because they're moving away from the books, they're streamlining in and narrowing very much into this is the final destination, which means they're getting rid of a lot of storylines that could potentially be covered more in the books when they're eventually released. And then there's the whole George R.R. Martin, he might change his mind completely after he finishes writing, so I guess we'll find out, but I think in the end it will be a vaguely similar ending. Studying fantasy is really interesting that it's rooted so much in folklore, so quite historical backgrounds, but it also tends to be adapted a lot, made more accessible, move into popular fiction, so that makes it a really interesting thing to follow the evolution of, and Game of Thrones is sort of emblematic of that in some ways, because at the start it's quite a typical fantasy, very male dominated, a medieval type society, there's some dragons, but then as the books and the TV series move forwards it becomes quite female dominated. You see some of the hero's journey type arcs getting distorted, and that just makes it really interesting to look at because it's showing the evolution of fantasy and where it's kind of going. At Bangor University I've gotten to just dive right in, be able to watch and consume lots of things and think about how these changes are happening in fantasy, and learn about theories about how the readers might be influencing it or the technology might be changing things. So I'm getting to really dig into things at Bangor.